Good evening, friends. I welcome you all to today's session on a very important topic, not only from the point of view of uh, uh, law optional, but I would say that it has got more to help you in the general studies polity paper. It will help you in many ways. First of all, being a student of law, you ought to know the constitution, of course, as such, because it's a major part of your syllabus in for paper one, but also because you must know its historical development, how it came into its present form. Okay, how it evolved from the British time, what steps were taken, what authority was given to the people of this country to have their own system of governance. A very important topic, because it will not only help us in enhancing our general knowledge, but also being a law student, we must know this whole process of making of the constitution. So far, in our earlier sessions, we have learnt about what constitution is, what is its role, what is the objective of the constitution, why do we need a constitution, and for what purpose. So all these things we have covered in our earlier sessions in a very general manner. Okay. Now, as I told you earlier, that our initial few sessions will be of extremely general in nature, but they will build up a strong foundation for you to, go for learning of complex topics and subjects, particularly with respect to Constitution of India and administrative law. These two are very, very important topics, cover almost two-thirds of the syllabus of paper one. But what we are going to learn today and discuss today is also going to help you a lot in your general studies papers, uh, particularly with respect to polity. Now, when we look at constitution as a statute, as a law, as a basic law and supreme and fundamental law of our country, we lot of complexities are involved in its making, particularly its bringing it to its present form. Uh, when any nation is born, either a new nation is born or there is a change in its governance. Like in our case, we were under British rule for almost 200 years. Now, in 1947, when we got independence and the Britishers, they left, the whole task of governance of our country came on our own shoulders, the people of India, not to a few, as we discussed yesterday, different forms of governance. We found that we are a democratic republic. We have chosen that form of governance. So, who has opted for that? The people of India. When we got the independence. With the independence came a very big responsibility on the shoulders of the people. It was not only the result of their long drawn struggle against the British rule that we were able to get the independence, but also they left with us a very great responsibility of governing ourselves, governing our own free, independent India. And the whole process got more complex because of the partition. See, had it been only one single unit, single country, as it was during the British rule, and could have got the independence, and then to be managed as a single unit was a different story. It could have been a different story. But no, that didn't happen. We got two dominions. And those two dominions were the creation of Indian Independence Act of 1947, which of course laid the path for our independence, but also creation of another part from India, from the territory of India into Pakistan. So we had, it created it not only gave us freedom and independence, but also created a very complex situation. It created a new nation, which was carved out of our own India. So from one single unit, it became two dominions, two nations. So that created more problems and complexities. But yes, we had very matured political leadership. We are very lucky to have at that time highly learned people who gave us, who drafted this constitution, enacted it, and we adopted it. The whole credit goes to them, their wisdom, their knowledge, their expertise. And because of their such Herculean efforts, we were able to get one of the best constitutions of the world. It's the largest constitution. It has got, as we discussed even yesterday, in the sources of constitution, we got the best from various, we had chosen the best features from various constitutions across the globe, from various countries, their constitutions. We adopted them. What suited us? What was best suited for us? We were a nascent nation. Why nascent? Because we were just born in a new incarnation of a free, independent nation, sovereign nation, without any control from any other force or any other nation like we were earlier under the British. So let us start today with the very important topic of making of constitution. Now, please remember, we have not yet sent you the notes, but that's why I'm casting a larger responsibility on you today to kindly make your own notes. I will be little slow so that you are able to understand and simultaneously take down your notes. Later on, you can go through them and then rewrite them in your own language. But today's your task will be to listen to me carefully. Whatever points are discussed here, make a note of each and every point without missing them, because I have compressed the whole of this process of making into a small discussion, small session of about 1.5 hours. So, if you miss out anything, I think it will be very difficult to have that flow. Of course, I will clarify it to you later on, but that flow will be broken. So let us start with our first topic. So again, briefly, we will mention what is Constitution. It is the supreme law of the country. It reflects the aims and aspirations of the people. First is the supreme law, that is, it is the fundamental law. No law is above that. And it reflects since people are the source, people have themselves given them this constitution, so it has to reflect the aims and aspirations. What kind of country the people of India wanted? What kind of governance, we will be governed? That was the aspiration of the people of a free and independent India. After a long period of, slavery and, subordination to others, we became independent, and then our aspirations, of course, were unlimited. But main aspirations were what? To have a sovereign nation, to have a democratic republic where people's will be supreme. So, in a democracy, it is the governance by the people. So, these were the aspirations of the people at the time of independence. What they envisaged of India, a free India, was a dream came true. The dream was to have their own governance, that they govern themselves, not somebody else. Now, structure of the governance of the country is reflected in the constitution. Yesterday we had an understanding of governance in my yesterday's session. Now, so we have adopted what? A democratic setup, democratic form of governance, and a republic. I have already explained, but those who have joined us today, democracy is the rule of the people, and republic is where the head of the state is elected. Okay? Now, it is the source and fountainhead of authority. See, once we have decided the type of governance, then we have to provide them certain authority to govern. People, they themselves do not govern directly. They govern themselves and the country through their elected representatives and other forms of the governance, other parts rather of the governance. The whole system is democratic republic system, and within that system, the subsystems are what? What are the different wings? The wings are legislature, the other wing is the executive, and the third wing is the judiciary. Now, once these three wings have been created by the Constitution, these three wings have been created by the Constitution. They are the creation of the Constitution. So, they also derive their authority from the same Constitution. So, what are those authorities? The authority is the law-making authority, implementation of the laws, and the interpretation of the laws. So, these three wings derive their authority from this fountainhead of authority, that is the Constitution. So, it is a basic requirement of any nation. As I told you just now, when a new nation is born or there is an entire change of system of governance, maybe there is a democratic country and suddenly it becomes a dictatorship. or there is a dictatorship and it opts for democracy. It is a monarchy but transits into a democracy. Like we can have the example of Pakistan changing over from democracy, so-called democracy, to dictatorship, again back to democracy. Or in the case of monarchy, we have United Kingdom, monarch to present democratic setup. So similarly, India was uh, not a free country. We were under British rule. So a new nation was born, a new free India was born, and we needed what? A basic form of governance in written form. Various wings were to be created, how we will be governed, and then the authority to be given to all these wings to exercise that for the governance of the country. Now we come to the initial phase. We actually start with the making of the constitution. First time when we had this idea, we were given this impression that, look, the independence was in sight. It was coming, though we were under British rule. But we were getting the signs, look, India is going to get the independence. So the process internally had, that thinking process or in principle process had started during the British rule itself. So the first thing which came to the minds of our political leadership was that we would be having a constitution. The first idea was floated in, it should be 1934, sorry, there's a mistake, by M.N. Roy. He was a communist leader. But then Indian National Congress, the major political party, raised this issue, a demand for constitution, in 1935, the very next year. Then this demand was accepted by the British themselves because they knew that they are going to give independence. They are going to leave the country, leave the governance of this country into the hands of the people of the country. So they also found this demand as genuine, and then it was accepted. So then what process was started? It's a Cripps mission. Sir Stafford Cripps. Now, in 1942, World War II was on. Okay? So, what we were made to understand was that after the World War II ends, the Britishers will be leaving the country. So, in that process, during this World War II itself, in 1942, a draft proposal was prepared by the Cripps mission. Now, what happened? Since Muslim League was for demanding two nations. They were demanding creation of another nation, Pakistan, of what? Muslim-dominated area. So they wanted the division of the country, the partition of the country on the basis of religion. So their main demand was this, and they rejected the demand for one single constitution. Since they were demanding two nations, a separate nation on religious lines, they rejected it and then demanded two constituent assemblies instead of one. Now, this cabinet mission rejected this demand and they had a scheme for one single constituent assembly, single, instead of the demand of the Muslim League for two. So, single constituent assembly. Now, we proceed further. Till now, things are clear. So, who will make the constitution? Who will draft the constitution? Who will enact it? And who will have the authority to, make it a law, the supreme law of the country? For that, a representative body was required. What do you mean by representative body? Now, Britishers wanted that the power should flow from them into the hands of the people. Now, and we were opting for a democracy, democratic republic country. Now, in that system, who should have the authority? It is the people, but not directly. They were to exercise this authority through their representatives. So then, who would be the members of this assembly? First thing is the need for the assembly, because only a representative body can create a law. Only legislature has the duty to perform or to make the law. They have the law-making authority. So this was the law-making authority as far as Constitution was concerned, the Constituent Assembly. So its character was what? Its character was representative character, because the power was to flow from people, that is the citizens. Now we can say from people, it should be exercised by their representatives. Now, how will they get the representatives? There was no system of direct election. Elections were being held on communal, franchise, not like the universal franchise we have now, that everybody has equal right of vote. We have universal adult franchise under our constitution, but that was not there during the British rule. So there were representatives, though elected, in the provincial assemblies. There were two kinds of, units. Now I'll tell you. What were those two kinds of units? The territorial units, we can say, territorial as well as the units of governance. Now, they were divided into two parts. One was the British provinces. Okay, and the other was the princely states. I will explain to you now in more, simplified manner. British provinces were under the direct control of the British. They were directly governed by the British. Through whom? Through governors. Now there were 17 provinces, right? And there were 565 princely states. What was the difference? For the British provinces, there were governors and there were provincial assemblies. assemblies. More or less like, the state assemblies now we have. So on those lines only, the provincial assemblies were there. In those provincial assemblies, there were elected members. There were bicameral system, like one is the provincial legislatures and then the provincial councils. Now, it was the role of governor was very important. The governor used to appoint the ministers. So, governor was the supreme power. There was no system of, chief ministers as we have now, and governor has least role to play, though he is a constitutional head of the state, but the actual governance is done by the chief minister and his council of ministers. So, in the British 17 provinces, we had this type of system which was more or less representative in character. But they were on communal lines. Each community had their own representatives, though elected. The princely states were under the control of the Rajas. And they were substantial in number, 565 princely states. They were small units, small and large units, powerful, they were controlling, but they were ultimately under the control of the British. They could not go against the wishes or against the dictates of British. So that is why in the whole British India, we had these two systems. These are very important to understand. As we proceed further, you will note. So what happened was, what was the composition? This is where my explanation for princely states and provinces will help you. What was the composition of the Constituent Assembly? How it was to be constituted? So there was in November, under the Cabinet Mission Plan, the total strength of the Constituent Assembly was determined at 389, out of which 296 were from the provinces. They were to be from provinces, and 93 from the princely states, 93 members. So together, put together, 389. Now, who were in charge of the provinces? We have seen the governors were in charge of the provinces, and who were in charge of princely states? Though Rajas were there, but there were British representatives, British officers to control, to implement the laws of the British, and they were called chief commissioners. There were basically 4 chief commissioners, and we had 11 governors. Okay? How it will come, we will see in the next slide. The seats in proportion of respective population. So population was the basis for determining the number of seats. This 389 figure was reached based on the population. Even now, we are, population is the criteria for determining the number of seats. Okay, like the election commission in the present day, they keep on changing. They do the process of delimitation. We will study it when we study the constitution, present constitution, and election commission and its role. So roughly about 1 seat for 1 million population. This was the ratio. Like now, division of seats was as per the community's proportion. They were communities proportionate. How? Like, what are those communities? We had Hindus, we had Muslims, we had Sikhs, we had Christians, etc. So, in their proportion, the division of seats. As I told you, even in the provincial assemblies, the representative character was in proportion to on the basis of communities. So the same communities, the representatives of the communities, they were to send the members to the Constituent Assembly. So basically, it was based on communal representation. So each community represented by their member, elected by voting. Voting by whom? Voting by through a process of single transferable vote. Now, even now, we are following the principle of single transferable vote as far as election of members of Rajya Sabha is concerned. It's slightly complex system. We will discuss in detail, but there are, just for your knowledge, the initial knowledge, you must understand that there is a preferential vote. If suppose there are 4 candidates, then 1, 2, 3, 4. First preference, second preference, third preference, and fourth preference. So the first preference vote will fill up the vacancies first, and then the second preference vote will go, and the person with the least preference vote, the candidate with the least preference vote will be out. Right? So this is a system of single transferable vote. Now, what happened? This was for the provincial assemblies. In the case of princely states, the representatives to be nominated. They were not to be elected, but nominated by heads of those states, that is, the Rajas and the chief commissioners. So, head of the state will nominate. Here it was the election. So, more representative, but since princely states were not completely autonomous, they were not following the principles of democratic processes, because being Rajwadas or kingdoms or princely states, they were under the control of the king. So there was no question of any democratic setup there. So basically, the Constituent Assembly was to be partly elected and partly nominated, as we have seen now. So, in the final we found that out of that 289, Indian National Congress got 208, Muslim League got 73, and small groups and independents were 15 through the process of election. Okay, the process I have already explained. So they were basically from election from the provincial assemblies. Now came the turn of the princely states. They preferred to stay away, though their number was to be 93. So they said, we will not send our representatives. Why? The basic reason was power. They never wanted to let the power go out of their hands. This was first thing. Second thing was, they were not sure what kind of and in what format, in what formation, in what characteristic the independence will be given to our country. So it was the question of like power slipping out of their hands that they decided not to be a party to this whole process of constituting the Constituent Assembly. So, though they were represented by all sections of Indian society, but they were not directly elected. This concept should be very clear to you, then only we will proceed further. So, now we come to the actual working of the Constituent Assembly. We have seen the composition. Now we come to how it started functioning. The first meeting was held on December 9, 1946. But Muslim League were demanding a separate dominion, Pakistan. So they boycotted it because their initial demand was also for two constituent assemblies, which was turned down. But then when the whole process started and the Constituent Assembly came into being, their demand grew in force. They were very particular about creation of another country, Pakistan. So that is why they boycotted it. And the first meeting was attended by 211. Mind you, 93 were already not there from the princely states. And out of these also, those who were 208 plus these independent members, Muslim League boycotted, so only 211 were there. So first thing is to elect a temporary president of the assembly. As it happens, now it is being followed like a convention that when the Lok Sabha or even the legislature assemblies are constituted after elections, what happens? We appoint, the elected representatives appoint a pro tem speaker. So at that time there was no question, it has to be a president. So they elected a temporary president, Dr. Sachidanand Sinha, being the oldest member, to give respect to his age and stature. But the first elected president was Dr. Rajendra Prasad. He had two vice presidents, S.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari. So, in the final we had one elected president, Dr. Jindal Prasad, and we had two vice presidents working with him. Now, once it was constituted, the president is in place, the members are there, then objectives of the Constituent Assembly had to be framed. For what purpose? What will be the objectives of this Constituent Assembly? So that was moved by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on 13th December 1947. So what were the broad objectives? Number one, that we should have India as an independent sovereign republic state. Independent, sovereign and republic state. I think I have already clarified these terms. So we will proceed further. So what will be the structure of this state? Will be union of states plus other territories. So now also, if we refer to Article 1 of our present Constitution, it says India shall be a union of states And what will be the, formation of this union? It will be the states plus other territories, that is union territories. Not at that time it was other territories. Now, presently I am saying states plus union territories and also the territories which are acquired. We'll study later on when we study Union of India. But try to understand, even at that time, the objective was to have a union of states, not by way of any agreement or any treaty. Powers and autonomy of territories to be decided by the Constituent Assembly. So, the Constituent Assembly's another objective was to determine the powers and authorities of the territories constituting the Union. Now, powers and authority was to be derived which government? Now, in the case of provincial governments, it's okay, it was fine. But when it came to princely states, whose fate was not yet decided as to how they will be forming part of the union, whether they will remain in India or they will go to Pakistan. So that was not yet decided. How it was decided, we'll come to that. Okay. But even in the case of princely states, the power and authority was derived for the governance of those states. How? Their autonomous character was to be maintained. Their autonomy. To maintain their autonomy. Because otherwise, autonomy was to be maintained. Otherwise, which king will like to lose his control over his territory, his state, his kingdom? So they were to be assured some kind of autonomy of governance. So what kind of autonomy? It was to be left to the Constituent Assembly. It was one of the objectives. Then to guarantee and secure justice, all three kinds of justice, social, economic, political, equality, freedom, etc. Adequate safeguards for minorities, backward classes, tribals, and other oppressed classes. Very important, because at that time, unlike our present India, we have, there's a principle of equality, there's a principle of upliftment of the backward classes and the classes like scheduled caste and scheduled tribes through affirmative action. I will explain to you when we come to those topics, but for the time being, today's scenario is entirely different from what prevailed during the British time. There were oppressed classes, there were backward classes, there were minorities, and the people who were not treated equally. There was no principle of equality, even within our own social system. So, in the social, economic and political system, there was no room for equality at that time, unfortunately. So, to address that ills of our system, this was created as one of the objectives to have adequate safeguards. So, integrity and sovereign rights on land, sea and air. When we talk of sovereignty, we must have a complete control not only on our land, but on air and our water, sea. We have now territorial waters, exclusive economic zones, etc. We will discuss that at appropriate time. But a sovereignty of the country is not complete unless these three are sovereign and under the complete control of the sovereign nation. Now, if you see all these features which we have discussed now appear where? Appear in the preamble of our present constitution. And not only they appear in the preamble, but they are reflected in various provisions of the constitution. So, the seeds were born there. Seeds were laid at that time by way of objectives. So, it was adopted on 22nd January 1947, moved on 13th December 46 and adopted on 22nd January by the Constituent Assembly. So, now composition is there, it is in place, objectives are set. What next? Next came Indian Independence Act of 1947. It is here the two-nation theory was adopted. It laid down the path for partition of the country into two, India and Pakistan. And then the fate of the princely states was also decided. They were given the authority to either opt for India or go to Pakistan through a instrument of accession. So that was given to the principal states. So once they got that kind of guarantee, just see their mindset. Earlier they were not sure, so they boycotted it. But now they were given a kind of autonomy, a choice. Okay, a decision making was left to them, whether to go on this side or to opt for the other side. So they started falling in line. That means they started coming to sending their representatives to the Constituent Assembly. Earlier they were not. 93 seats were there for them. Now came the Mountbatten Plan on 3rd of May 1947, which was for the partition. And once it came, then most of the members, they took their seats. They joined the process of Constituent Assembly. And Muslim League members also from the Indian Dominion, not from the Pakistan part. Indian Dominion, they also entered the Constituent Assembly. Then Assembly was made fully sovereign body. Now, keeping in mind the objectives earlier adopted, the Assembly was treated as a sovereign body to take any decision, which included now any decision means they were to decide the fate of the governance of our country, independent India. So they had to be treated as a legislative body because the law-making power is only with the legislature in a democratic setup. So they were given the status of legislative body to do what? Two things. Number one was to making the constitution for free India, and second was for enacting other ordinary laws, because law-making power was given to them. So, because even constitution being the supreme law of the nation was to be passed by the legislature. It was to be passed like any other act, any other law. So that is why this was treated as a legislative body, so that it could adopt the constitution besides other laws. for the governance. Now, Muslim League members, they withdrew once, it was decided that the Pakistan was there. So after they withdrew, the strength of the assembly, Constituent Assembly, came down to 299. Now, as against 389. So Indian provinces, the membership came down from 299 to 296. And from princely states, it came down to 70 from 93. I think there's something wrong in this figure. I'll just check and get back to you. I'll correct it. Just give me a minute. There's some mistake in this. Let me correct that. I'll give you the correct figure in a while. Let's proceed further. I'll just give you the correct figure. But yes, it came down from original 299. So that...
Sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, nobody is speaking.
Yes, tell me, Nivalita.
Sir, you said 229.
No, that's what I am saying. The figure is not correct. I'll correct it and let you know.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Because the total was 290. It came down to 299 from the total 389, original 389. So this figure is not correct. I'll just let you know in a while. I've got the figure. I'll have to search for that. Before we end the session, I'll correct it. Now, other functions of the Constituent Assembly were, besides making the constitution and besides making the other ordinary laws, it was to ratify the India's membership of Commonwealth. Okay? Why? Because all the British colonies, a Commonwealth was formed and they were all part of that. So it was left to the Constituent Assembly to decide whether India will remain a member of the Commonwealth or not, and it was ratified. Constituent Assembly ratified in May 1949. It adopted the national flag on 22nd July 1947, adopted national anthem on 24th January and also national song on 24th January. It elected Dr. Jindal Prasad as the first president of India on January 24, 1950. That is 2 days before our Republic Day, when the Constitution came into force. Now, there were certain committees were formed. See, it is not possible for the entire assembly, entire membership of the assembly to either draft a law or draft the constitution, which is going to be the supreme law of the country. So they had to form certain committees consisting of experts, people of wisdom, expertise in various fields to conduct various functions. Now, these were the committees. Union Powers Committee under Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. These were some of the major committees. Union Constitution Committee under Nehruji. Provincial Constitution Committee under Sardar Patel. Drafting Committee under B.R. Ambedkar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Very important. How? We will see now. Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities and Tribal Excluded Areas by Sardar Patel. Rules of Procedure Committee by Dr. Jindal Prasad. States Committee, Committee for Negotiating with the States, that is the princely states, Jawaharlal Nehru, and a steering committee under Dr. Jindal Prasad. These are important committees. Make a note of them. In notes also we'll be sending it to you. But these were very important committees who addressed different issues. But the main committee was the committee number 4, Drafting Committee for the Constitution. Because But they also took inputs from other committees. Now we come to the drafting committee. It was this committee that was entrusted with the task of preparing a draft of the new constitution. Very, very important, crucial task. Okay, so it consisted of 7 members. Who were the 7 members? Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar was the chairman, N Gopalaswamy Iyengar, Aladi Krishnaswamy Iyer, Dr. K. M. Munshi, Sayyid Muhammad Sadullah, N. Madhva Rao. He replaced M. L. Mittal, who resigned due to ill health. T. T. Krishnamachari. He replaced D. P. Khetan, who died in 1948. So 7 members under the chairmanship of Dr. B. R. Ambedkar, a drafting committee for preparing a draft of the new constitution. So the first draft was published in February 1948. Now we are coming to the finalization of the constitution. People were given 8 months for what? Once the first draft was there, it was publicized. Opinions, objections, etc., suggestions were invited from the people. It's very important. Even now, this process is followed in few cases where on the drafts for any new law, the suggestions of the people are invited and are welcome. And more so, constitution was going to be the supreme law of the country. Though they were all representatives of the people, but still the people's aspirations were to be taken into consideration. That is why the people were given 8 months' time to give their suggestions. So, based on that, the second draft was prepared in October 1948. Then came the enactment process. Okay, first was preparing the final draft, but then it came to, slowly it is coming into shape. How? The final draft was introduced on 4th of November, that is done in the first reading. That is when the bill is there. In this case, it was a draft constitution. In other laws, it is taken as a bill. So, in that, first reading was done in the Constituent Assembly. Then a second reading, which is clause by clause. Each and every word and in the clause, in every sentence, had to be carefully read, discussed, and then only finalized. Because it was the most important document for our governance. So this took time from 1511 to 1710, 1949. This much time was taken because it's the lengthiest document, lengthiest constitution, needed time. So third reading was done after this on 14th of November 1949. And finally, after 12 days, it was adopted, enacted, and given to ourselves on 26th November 1949. Mind you, after this enaction, preamble was enacted after that. Okay, when we study preamble in detail, we will study this aspect also. But this is for your knowledge of finalization of the constitution, that preamble was enacted after this. And the most important person, the chairman of the drafting committee, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, was given the title of Father of Indian Constitution. Okay, he was the then law minister, a very learned person. I mean, you can see from the constitution itself. I mean, such a beautiful document they have produced. They have given us the past, present, and the future of our governance. So obviously he had to be named the father of Indian Constitution. Now, after that came the enforcement part. Why enforcement? We have enacted, we have adopted on 26th November 1949. Now, immediately after that, we have adopted it. We know what kind of governance structure we are going to have. We are going to have what? Democracy. So, what is the first, important part of democracy is the people have to rule through their elected representatives. Now, how they will be elected? Through a general election. Who will elect them? Not the foreigners, but the citizens. So, the important part which was to come into operation was the citizenship. So, citizenship came into force on 26/11/1949 itself. We will study citizenship. There is a separate chapter on that. Article 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 11, I think. But Article 5 gives us the main citizenship character. So that those sections, those articles came into operation, came into force on the very day of adoption of the Constitution. Along with them also came what? Why I am telling you? Because this is the reason for that. The logic is this, that they were to be governed by their elected representatives, and these elected representatives should also be the citizens of the country. The president has to be citizen of the country. The prime minister has to be citizen of the country. The bureaucracy has to be citizen of the country. They have to be citizen of the judiciary has to be citizen of the country. A foreigner cannot be our prime minister or president or holding an office under the government. So they had to be there. A government had to be put in place. That is why citizenship was the first thing which came into force immediately on the adoption of the Constitution. Along with that, certain other parts also came into operation immediately as per the need. I have not mentioned the articles now, but they will be in your notes. The remaining part came into force on 26th January 1950, which is our also known as the Republic Day. Because on that day we became a truly democratic republic country. Now what happened to these acts? Government of India Act 1935, which was working as a constitution during the British time till we got our own constitution. And India Independence Act 1947, they were repealed. And also some other supplementary laws which were related to these two. So all those laws were repealed. After 1950, 26 January 1950, we will study in Article 13 as to what kind of laws came into force and are still into force. Article 13, when we will study fundamental rights, we will study Article 13, law, the definition of law. Law which is enforceable, which are in force. Now, previously, certain doctrines along with that doctrine of eclipse, doctrine of severability. We'll study in detail in Article 13. But for the time being, just remember that these old acts, which were enacted by the British Parliament, were stood repealed once Constitution came into force. Now we come to, of course, when we look at from examination point of view, most of the questions asked are critically examine this statement or that statement, or any particular topic is given, and then you are asked to critically examine that. What does that mean? That means you have to not only write what that statement or what that topic means, but also find out what could be the possible criticism of that. That's very important. We watch films. We say the critics' remarks are this about this feature film or about this drama. Now, about this song. So everything, there are two, ways of looking at it. One part is you favor it completely, other is you don't like it, and the third is where there is a criticism on that, certain parts which you find fault with. Okay, so similarly in the case of Constituent Assembly also, there has been criticism, and we cannot ignore that from our knowledge point of view and also from the point of view of examination. So what were those? It was not a representative body. This was the main criticism. Why? They argued that Constituent Assembly was not a representative body as its members were not directly elected. You understand that? They were not directly elected. They were elected from the provincial assembly members. So they were not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of what? Universal adult franchise, I have already explained. So this was the first and the main criticism. Second, it's not a sovereign body. That what? Constituent Assembly was not a sovereign body as it was created by the proposal of the British government. As I told you, sovereign body is one which is neither created by any other person or any other force or any other authority, and they are autonomous. They are free to take their own decisions. Neither their creation nor their functioning is influenced by any other force. But in this case, the proposal was from us and it was accepted by the Britishers. Okay, and then finally it was constituted. So this is one of the criticisms. It was time consuming, took unduly long time to make the constitution. Criticism again, dominated by Congress. Yes, they charge that it was dominated by the Indian National Congress Party. Lawyer politician domination, that the majority of the members were from this combination. You were lawyers and they were also politicians. That the other sections of the society were not sufficiently represented, and then dominated by Hindus. Winston Churchill commented that the Constituent Assembly represented only one major community in India. When we look at our, this criticism, about 5-6 points are there. They are all relevant because nothing is irrelevant as far as opinion formation is concerned on any issue. But let me tell you, when we write our answers, I am coming to the actual answer writing. When it is written, critically examine this. First, write the main part, whatever is the statement, factual position, if it comes on the Constituent Assembly, how it was formed, this in whatever word limits are there, its main feature, objectives, etc., how it was formed. When it comes to criticism, then you write, yes, it has been criticized on these issues. Then you give your own opinion. Opinion not colored by any political bias, not colored or influenced by illogical thinking, but based on facts. Give only factual and logical reasoning while giving your own opinion, if it is called for. To sum up in the conclusion, okay, look, this was the criticism, but the situation at that time was like that. If we say it was not a sovereign body, it was under the British government, yes, we were under the British rule. How there could be a sovereign body without an approval from the rulers of that time? So this should be your answer to that criticism. Similarly, it was not possible to have universal adult franchise elections based on universal adult franchise, because there was no constitutional provision for that, number one. Number two, India was not a single unit as we are having now. It was not a union. It was divided into provinces and princely states. So it was not, princely states were under the control of their respective kings, rulers. So it was not possible at that time to have this kind of directly elected body. So dominated by Congress, yes, it was the major party at that time, major political party. So of course, the representatives from the major political party were there. Time consuming. We can say that ours is one of the best constitutions in the world. Longest, largest, having all the features, important features from wherever possible we could get, and we have incorporated them, we have adopted them to our own situations, our own societal needs, our own system of governance. And when you choose the best, you have to spend time. So that is how it was time consuming. So lawyer politician domination, because at that time, see, now we have a large part of population who are literate, who are educated, and they represent various parts of the society. But not at that time. Not many people were educated. And this is a task which has to be done by educated people. And I once again reiterate that people with legal background, knowledge of law, academically and in practice, have a better analytical sense. So that is why most of these members were either lawyers and a combination of lawyer politician, and it was good that we had the best brains. Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar himself was a great lawyer. So a duty was cast upon them, which they did very well, extremely well. And dominated by Hindus, no doubt, but ours is a the majority community is Hindus. So they had to be dominated. The maximum number of representatives had to be from that particular section of the society, that community. And this is what Winston Churchill had also commented. Very rightly so. But that was the reality. So we can't ignore that. So all this criticism can be replied in your conclusion of the answer in a very positive manner without any personal biases on very, very logical platform. Okay, so with this, I conclude this session on making of the constitution. This one part, I think, which that number I wanted to give you. Let me just see if I can. Yeah, it came down to 229 from 299. Okay, 296 to 229. I'll take you back there. Yeah, here. So it is not 299, it is 229. So 229 plus 70 becomes 299. Right? This number. Okay, you got it? I think somebody asked me this.
Yes, sir, now I got it.
Okay. Right, friends. So, any other doubts, any questions you want to ask, any clarifications you want, please, yeah, tell me.
Sir, Manoj, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Manoj. Yeah, tell me.
Sir, could you please explain the words enactment and adoption, sir?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, can I write on this? It will do?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there are two words. One is called enactment. And on this side, I will write adoption. Manoj, you know what we call, when a law is made, what we call it? It's enacted. It becomes an act. Okay? It comes from the word act. Now, I'll just take one example, like this is the act. Okay? Now, before the passing of this act, it was what? It was a bill. Right? When it is introduced in the parliament, either house of the parliament, it is a bill. Now, a bill is passed by the one house, then goes to another, it is still a bill. It is passed by the other house, then it goes to president for his assent. Okay? Then it is published in the Gazette. Once it gets the assent of the president, it goes to the to Gazette for publication. The moment it is signed and published in the Gazette, it becomes what? An act. That is the process of enactment. Remember this word. Okay? It is enacted. It becomes an act from a bill. Now comes the adoption. Adoption means when it starts, it comes into force. It starts its operation. We have adopted, we have enacted, we have adopted, and now onwards it will come into force. Whether it comes into force in full or in parts, as in the case of Constitution. It was adopted on 26th November 1949. That means enacted and adopted on the same day, but not all parts. Only few parts. In the case of other acts, maybe, it is left to the government, when it will come into force, they may specify the date. It will come into force from this date. Okay? Okay, got it? So, yes, adoption is when you adopt it for its operation.
When it comes into force.
Force, yes, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Yes, any other uh, question? You will be getting the notes very shortly. Don't worry, all this in detail, I mean, which you can use it for your examination purpose also. I have tried to make the things only clear and simplified to you, but the other things which you may require for your examination purpose will be coming. Yeah, please. Somebody is asking. Huh?
Yes,
Please.
sir. I'm Nanshu here.
Yes, Himanshu, tell me.
Sir, you had explained one part
Hmm.
wherein you were trying to explain the princely states
Hmm.
where how they had not participated, sir.
Yes, yes,
Sir,
yes.
below that slide, the very last line I could not get it, sir. Could you
I,
help us
okay,
over
okay.
here?
We'll go back to that. Tell me where to stop. Yeah, here it was. Princely states stayed away. Do you want to go still back?
Yes, sir. More back, sir.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah. This one? It,
Yes, sir.
huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So tell me, what do you want from this?
Sir, here
Yeah.
that the princely states they nominated directly to the Constituent Assembly.
Yes.
Right? But sir, they did not elect and they did not participate. So, sir, confused there.
No, I'll tell you why. See, in the case of princely states, who were governing princely states? The kings. Okay. The rulers of those princely states, they were called Maharajas. You know, they were Rajmata or Maharajas, like that. So they were independent autonomous units. Governance was like a, monarch. King was the monarch. But they were not away from the British India. They were part of British India, like an island in that. Okay. So they were controlling any Raja or any monarch. There was no democratic system there. There was no system of election. Election is held for what? Electing your elected representatives who will govern you, who will make laws for you, or who will, take executive actions. But through the executive, they will issue the laws, they will issue the instructions to them. But in the case of princely states, it was the Raja who was governing. So there was no question of any democracy there. So there was no question of any elected representatives. It was to be nominated by the Rajas, the rulers, the head of the state. So, yes, in 565 princely states, there was not to be any real representative character as far as the members of the Constituent Assembly. They were to be nominated. That's what I said in my next slide. They were nominated. They were not elected. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, please. Somebody is there. Somebody else wanted to ask. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. So, on the point of criticism of Constituent Assembly,
On the point
the
of,
last point was
can you just, on the point,
yes, sir.
yeah, tell me.
The last point in the criticism of Constituent Assembly.
Yeah.
The point was that it was dominated by women. So this is just a question we need to get your input on that.
Which one was that?
The last point, sir.
This is dominated by Hindus, you want to say?
Yes, sir. This is something related with my question is something related.
Tell me.
Whenever there is a committee or whenever there is a body which needs to test let's say, complex functions while taking public offices, there is always criticism about it lacking women, lacking transgenders, and lacking people from certain backgrounds.
Yeah.
For example, the reform, the committee for reform in the criminal law. This was the criticism. How valid do you think this criticism is about the lack of representation?
No.
Shouldn't merit
Yeah.
be more focused?
See, it is left to the, when we come to the representative character, who is going to make sure as to who is going to represent? Whom do we elect? It is the people who elect, and they become the representatives. Now they are the representatives of the people. This criticism will not hold good in a democracy. In a democracy, it is the people who elect through universal adult franchise. And those elected representatives, they may be from any religion, they may be from any caste, they may be with any background. Once they are elected by the people, they reflect the will of the people. And we cannot criticize that they were, dominated by one particular section or by another section. It is left to the people whom do they elect. So this criticism will not hold good, be it during those times by Winston Churchill in this case, or even in the present times. We are a democratic country. The actual power lies with the people whosoever they want to elect, they will do that. And whichever body they represent, we cannot say it has got a color of this or that. It is basically they are doing a job for the people who have elected them. So this criticism will not hold good in that case.
And so,
Yeah.
along with this criticism,
Yes.
this criticism is not really valid in my opinion also when it comes to the offices which need to discharge very specific and very complex duties. But at the same time, in the democratic setup, sort of diversity and representation is celebrated in that scenario.
Yeah.
So, are there any, what would be the key differences? This is that in one area it is not celebrated and in the other it is.
No, what do you mean by celebrated this? Can you just elaborate on that? I'm not able to understand this particular aspect. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'll give another.
Yeah.
So, let's say the government constitutes a body.
Okay.
And there is criticism that there are not enough women and there are not enough transgenders in that committee. When the representation is not the important part of it. The important point is its discharge of duties.
Very right.
But when it comes to democratically elected governments,
yes,
the same sort of diversity and the same sort of representation from different communities is celebrated. So, what do you think? What do you say causes this difference?
See, there are two aspects which you are mentioning. One is in the case of elected representatives, and they come from whatever strata of the society on the basis of the people's will, whomsoever they want to elect. Now, whatever government appoints a body, whose government? Government consists of the elected representatives whom the people have elected. Now, in that body, if there is a criticism that a particular society or a particular gender or a particular caste has not been represented, it is the will of the people which is working through these elected representatives. That criticism could be for any reason, but in fact, whatever the government does is for the welfare of the people. It is not against the people. It is for the welfare of the people because they are committed to that. In a democratic setup, they have to go back to the people and seek their mandate. They cannot simply, do on their own, on their sweet will. So whether it is a body formed by the government or the government itself, it is basically the will of the people. And that criticism, Himanshu, will definitely be there because you can't satisfy everybody. Now, whether it is in representative character or not, uh, that criticism will always be there because there cannot be a perfect system of functioning.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So, friends, any other question, any other this thing? I will again request our friends that kindly make your own notes, and if you feel like, you can send it to me for my comments. I may take a little time to go through them, but I will definitely revert back to all of you, all of your this thing. But my request to you as a guide, as a mentor is kindly, I'm not your coach, I'm only guiding you. Actual work has to be done by you people. So kindly make your own notes, whatever is being discussed here. I'm not teaching you, I'm just discussing certain issues, certain topics, certain uh, subjects. So whatever based on my discussion, whatever is there in the notes, convert them into your own words and write in your own handwriting. Don't say my handwriting is poor or you can't read it. I can read. There's no problem. My own handwriting, as you might have seen, is very, very bad. Okay? So, like a doctor. But still, I can make out, and even the people can make out what I am writing. But don't worry about that. Write in your own handwriting and with your own understanding. For me, your understanding is more important. If you are not able to understand, my discussion will go waste. So it is for you to how much you can pick up from this and reproduce in your own words, in your own handwriting. Yes, somebody wanted to ask me. There was some.
So yes, now.
Yeah, Namrata, yeah, tell me.
Sir, in one of the slide you had explained that the assembly had two vice presidents.
Yeah.
Why is it so?
See, that at that time there was no concept of the present vice president, as we have one president, one vice president, who is also the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, and like that. That time they were a body which was formed to perform certain duties which we have enlisted in the objectives and their actions they have taken. For that, they needed division and delegation of certain tasks. Now, president and the vice president at that time had certain administrative duties to perform also. So, those duties were to be divided, okay, delegated to certain authorities. So that is why they had two presidents. It's not that in one country, it was not at that time in the form of a country or a nation. It was the Constituent Assembly, a body to perform a certain duty, a certain function. And for performing those functions, they needed certain kinds of office bearers. Like we in any society, we have office bearers. We can have one president, we can have two vice presidents, we can have one honorary secretary, we can have joint secretary, like that. It was basically like administrative functions. The main functions were being done by various committees. So they were to perform various duties connected with the functioning of the Constituent Assembly. And that is why there were two vice presidents. So it was purely on administrative ground, not a constitutional structure. There was no constitution for Constituent Assembly. It was creation of a body, okay, and then that body was to perform certain duties, and that's why they chose to have two vice presidents. But now what we have is a constitutional system where the Constitution of India lays down that there will be a president, there will be a vice president, there will be a speaker like that, and what will be their duties and what will be their authority. So it was not at that time, it was like for functioning of the Constituent Assembly. Yes, any other query or any other?
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other clarification? Anything you want, I'm there. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. I'm again sorry for this delay in the class today, but I hope we'll try to remain punctual and hold the classes on time. But mind you, whether it is held late or in worst scenario, even if I am able to skip one of the days because of circumstances beyond my control, I tell you, no topic will be left. Entire syllabus and as per my scheme of things, whatever I want to discuss with you, clarify with you, to make you understand, not even a word will be left. If I am not able to do on a particular day, next day I'll cover the entire thing which is left over. But it will not happen. But still, in the worst scenario, but I tell you that nothing in the syllabus, nothing scheme of learning of the things, nothing will be left out. And I'll see to it that you are able to understand them properly and then reflect in your notes in your handwritten form. Okay? Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. We'll try to be on time. Thank you.
For more videos, subscribe to N BY IAS and press the bell icon to never miss an update.